Hi everyone. Welcome to our meetup, Data Visualization Zurich, number 13, where we'll be talking about data visualization guidelines in corporate environments. So my name is Guillemot. I'm an interaction engineer at Interactive Things here in Zurich. And I co-organized this event with Benjamin Wiederkehr, who is also with us tonight and is already greeting everyone in the chat. So welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. We organized this meetup to provide a space to share and advance knowledge about data visualization in our local community in Zurich, and to foster relationships and collaboration across disciplines and organizations. And this is our third online webinar. We are actually, me and both our presenters in our studio here at Interactive Things in Zurich. But for the meetup, we are using Crowdcast. So just a bit of logistics before we start on how to ask questions on Crowdcast. You can see below the video feed that there is a tab, Ask a Question. So you can, like anything with presentations, you can use this button to ask a question, and we will reserve some time in the end to address those questions. You can also upload questions that others have submitted. So about our speakers tonight, we have the pleasure to have with us Sofia Martynovich, who is a visual analytics consultant, and Tania, who is an interaction designer. Thank you very much for having accepted our invitations. We are really looking forward to hear what you have to say about data visualization guidelines for organizations. And we will have so both your presentations, about 20 minutes each, and then we'll have 20 minutes for questions and answers. So let's start. And Sofia, I leave you the stage. I think you will start.
Thank you. Hi everyone, and very warm welcomes. And I'm really happy to be here. Thanks to the guys from Interactive Studio. This topic is very dear to my heart because as a data visualization enthusiast, I have been always promoting it, and as a consultant, corporate is exactly the environment where I practically operate. So I used to do a lot of hands-on work in this area, as well as methodology work, creating design guidelines and approaches to how to drive projects in this area. Currently, I'm working at Accenture, and my job is to support our clients with their journey in analytics area, and of course, data visualization is a very huge part of it. I do realize that the topic and our talk is really focused on data visualization guidelines, but I actually wanted to start a bit broader, from a bit broader perspective, to just trying to find a way. Just give me a sec how to go to the next one. Okay, perfect. This one, yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I wanted to start from a bit broader perspective on the role of data visualization in corporate environment in general, and maybe a few words about the Accenture ways of work in that area, and also to provide, give some ideas on how to make design matter really for data visualization in corporate environment, because sometimes it's really not that easy. I believe that all of you guys who are here really have a certain affinity for DataVis, otherwise you will not be here. But I'm not sure how many of you actually work in the corporate domain, like as a consultant or as a in-house specialist working in analytics team. So for those of you who really do, I think you would probably agree with me that this area has really some specifics. Due to the fact that there is not so much room for creativity sometimes, and very often design practices are not very well accepted or not very well recognized the way they should be, and that's a little bit from the challenges perspective. But on the other hand, the technology evolution is really has been really great last few years, and also the number of use cases where the data visualization can be actually applied in the corporate environment has also grown immensely. So just starting in the beginning from very standardized reporting and data-centric approach in the beginning of 2010, it became really more user-centric, and this not only refers to the end users, but also to people who actually really work with data visualization. So analysts, data scientists, power users. So with this whole booming concept of self-service BI that started a few years ago, the role of the creator and the role of the consumer of data visualization really merged together. This was one of the big trends. Another one, like a really huge impact, was made by the artificial intelligence, and there was a huge shift from just standalone dashboards towards the DataVis, which is more embedded in a bigger systems, in a customer or employer-facing applications, or DataVis as a part of the experience. For example, as a part of the augmented reality or mixed reality applications, and of course, with all of this different variety of these different use cases, the data visualizations domain requires more and more product vision and product design approach with all the best practices of it, including the design guidelines. And at the same time, the role of the creator of the data visualization is the most important that it has never been, I would say, because finally people who are working and producing data visualization in corporate environment, they have a very close access to people who are actually demanding that or want to have that. So with all that, we have all the prerequisites to make it really right. Yeah. So at Accenture, most of the projects where we are dealing with data visualization, or in a corporate environment, I would rather use term visual analytics, are really bigger long-term projects which are aiming to build bigger analytics platforms. So for example, big reporting platforms with all stacks of technology, and in most of the cases, it's a really long-term project and highly complex projects. Therefore, multiple teams are working on those kind of projects, and together with the client. And for us, the team who's really looking after this front-end part or the visual analytics piece of work is Augmented Insights, and this is a team where I belong to. And for us, we have created a certain framework to help ourselves to navigate through the project work. And this framework is a collection of design guidelines, various templates, delivery methodology, etc. As for the delivery methodology, it is based on key 5 steps. You can see them on a slide. And we tend to think that with those 5 steps, more or less, typical project can be described and approached, starting from the discover to describe, co-create, scale, and to sustain. Also, we have created an interactive app, which you can also see a little bit below on the screen, this app basically has sort of a collection of different methods and assets for each and every phase of those 5 phases. And the really good thing about it is that it does include like a standard and well-known design methods, such as like stakeholder mapping or persona journeys. But it also has very specific to DatavisZRH area examples and methods, such as like storytelling with data practices and the methods how to organize the reporting structure or the reporting catalog of reports so that it's user-centric, but rather than data-centric. So yeah, this is kind of our toolkit, and that we are really using almost on a daily basis. Of course, it looks great on a slide. In reality, it's not always that easy, because as a consultant, we don't always have a luxury to start projects from the beginning, and sometimes you just find yourself in the middle, and you have to apply design guidelines when you're already at the project phase scale, right? So also, I assume many of you also have confronted stakeholders that are not necessarily sharing exactly the same level of passion as you do for design practices for the Dataviz. And I personally myself have confronted and have multiple. In many cases, I've heard something like quotes. Why do we really need those persona journeys? Again, this is something that you need for applications like Airbnb and other ones, because this is the cases when they don't know really their end users, and we as a company XYZ, of course we know what our head of finance needs and what are his or her reporting needs. So yes, it's probably another big specific feature of the corporate environment, that the people we are working with do have their own agendas, and it's really a big effort to change the mindset. But over the course of my work, I have somehow developed few practices or learnings, takeaways that actually somehow made my life easier, and eventually allowed me to apply design practices better. So, and I will be really happy to share them with you. So the first one is basically focusing on the way how the project cycle is running and normally organized. And the key idea is that whenever you start on a project, at whatever point in time or whatever stage, there is always a chance to start practicing better design. Of course, it's much easier when you start from the inception of the product, but at the same time, then you just simply have more chances to run the design phase better, smoother, and create design guidelines properly. But on the other hand, in the corporate environments, all of those products, there is like a living thing. So there's always going to be release 1, 2, 3, etc. That's why even if you are don't have a chance to work out design guidelines right now, there will be a chance maybe later when the existing product will be evolving. The same story with the user journey extensions or the organizational expansion, where companies are like adding or trying to scale their solutions or dashboards to another organizational units or geographies. It's always a good chance to somehow revise the persona concept and start or get back to it, or even maybe start from scratch. With the data acquisition, when you're trying to when you're adding basically a new data source to your dashboard or data visualization, it's also a great chance to revise the way the data model is organized, and typically brings more complexity to the front end side as well. So in most of the cases, that would also require to revise some design guidelines or revise how the user interface looks like. I've also added some of the links here and so some sources that I think might help in this situation. And yeah, I'm happy to share those slides later on with the audience. Another sort of piece of advice or the principle is basically around the working culture and the team setup on the projects which are focusing on the data visualization area. And here it's kind of historically the data visualization is usually done by data visualization tool developer, right? So it's like that, and then we are lucky if this person also has some eye for the design, and then a person can also create the very well versed dashboard from the design perspective. But in most of the cases, project leads really are failing to include very important roles and perspectives in the team, such as information designers and UI UX designers, who are actually really the best people to create those design guidelines, or change agents, who are really the best people to manage the adoption, the end user adoption of those products. So this list that you can see here on this slide is typically the setup, or like a set of roles that we are considering for the projects, of course, depending on the scale and the content, but we're really trying to keep the teams as much multidisciplinary as possible. There is another interesting perspective of, or like a blueprint that I also have here as a first link in the asset section. The blueprint of how currently this area of analytics and data visualization is shaped in the enterprise, like in the company itself. So what are those different roles that are possible, such as data steward, or data visualization product owner, and so on. So this one is done created by Tableau. So in case if you're interested, I think that might be also a good piece of reading. And the last one, but still, like I'd say very, very important one, is the product perspective, I would say. So I'm trying to think of the work not just as a data visualization, but as a digital product. And therefore, there is always useful to keep in mind different best practices that are used in that case, such as a vision and roadmap for the product, for the DatavisZRH as a product, and design guidelines, responsive and accessible design, branding and communication, and finally customer experience and support. Also, few very interesting sources here. I'm sure most of you know this DatavisZRH project, but such as a collection of different DatavisZRH types, but also very, very handy as a chapter of the design guidelines. Amazing blog, Storytelling with Data, which is really focusing on data visualization guidelines, specifically in business context, business environment, and then a few others, including brand systems, the design systems of Google and Uber. Yeah, so those three I think are like really. I was trying to think what are those three key things that I would recommend to keep in mind, and came up with those. Then, how does my time look like, Tania? It's still okay. Yeah. I still have a couple of minutes, so I wanted also to share a couple of examples with you of my projects and the projects that I've done with my team. How exactly we came up with or like applied those design practices in different client stories. The first one is really a story about branding and product vision and branding for the commercial analytics platform for a pharma company. So initially the project was really focusing more on the technology side of it, and the purpose was to bring all these different data sources under the umbrella of one big technology platform. But at the same time, we wanted also to somehow unify and promote the front end, like the user interface part of this solution. And we came up with I started brainstorming, and we came up with this brand for this platform, and with this landing page, and with the logo and everything. So all of those little elements that you can see here on this big picture on the left hand side are basically reports or dashboards that used to be kind of a standalone dashboards before that, and we've categorized them, and we created a sort of application structure out of it, and we brought them all in one in one homepage, in one landing page, and also added few other elements that really help to improve experience. Like, for example, on the top right corner, you can see the search by keywords, where you could just type in some sort of a keyword or like a KPI, for example, sales, and that would highlight you the reports where those KPIs are represented, and the rest. And then, of course, like working properly with all the design, with the design aspects of it, we also created the design guide that you can also see on the right side. It's a bit too small here, but it basically just has all the very detailed little elements of the dashboard layouts, which we really put together and try to explain. And it's just an extract. Of course, this design guide had more chapters, but it was done really properly. And after that, many other project teams, even beyond this commercial analytics platform, started using the same guidelines for their projects. And then a second one that I have is a story about the purely design guide, I would say, because the design guide has been created for a set of sectorial dashboards for government authority. Of course, the dashboards themselves were also beautifully done, but I still want to really emphasize the work with the design guides, because I've never seen, I think, such a robust and like very detailed oriented professional work. It really covered all the aspects from starting from the layout structure and also including all the different types of charts and visualizations that we used in all of those different 11 sectorial dashboards, and of course including the typography, the colors, and accessibility with all the like do's and don'ts and so on. So there was a really big piece of work and was done by our partner design agency, and eventually it had such a big impact that it was like submitted as a deliverable itself for this government authority, which I really think should be the case anyways, because those sort of artifacts, they're really important, I believe, because whenever this work continues, or maybe another contractor, another agency comes, they can just come back and refer to the work that has been done, and just keep the aesthetics and the work consistent across all the future products. Yeah, so that's what I have, and I think, Tania, you have more to tell from the agency perspective. Let's hand over.
Yeah, I'm Tania. I'm an interaction designer here at Interactive Things, and I would like today to share my experience when working with corporates and how we help them develop or better communicate their data. And during the past years, I have worked on some projects where I was required to extend like the corporate brand identity with some guidelines for data visualizations. But before going into the details, I would like to just to look at 3 questions as an introduction. What are data visualization style guides? Why do we need a specific guidelines for this field, this aspect? What should they include? Data visualization style guides are some standards, are like a collection of good practices and guides to explain how data can be represented. They include usually what, so the types of charts, but also the why and the reasons for using this specific aspect. It's often, and it's also sometimes accompanied by a template that would help to get started with the visualizations, and without having to like go into the details of the style. The creator of the data, of the analysis, could already get started immediately. Why do we need specific guidelines for data visualizations? In data visualizations, we have additional constraints, and we cannot just use the general brand guides for that, because we might work for simple pages. Something that might work for illustrations or some simple pages might not work for visualizations, where we have to deal with a bit higher density of information. Sometimes we have multiple dimensions, we need to distinguish them, and we need to show relations. So it's not always doable with like what is given with like just the brand guidelines. The general brand guidelines. Let me give you an example. Sometimes it is covered, it's usually cover the main colors for data visualizations, and that we can use like for let's say a good part of data that we want to show. But usually this is not enough. It's quite limiting. And what we do, starting from those, we create some color palettes that has a big spectrum, a broader spectrum of shades, and these will help us to represent some more dimensions and can be mix and match and combine for having more for the different cases. If we go a bit further and we try to specify how to use this palette, that would be even greater. This is like, for example, if a user has to create a sequential or has to use a sequential scale with just 3 categories, it will use here the second row and so on. So it's almost impossible that the creator would select wrong colors. As well for divergent scales. Same what here is explained for the colors, but it would also happen for a typography, because we need to create a lot of hierarchy in the data visualization, and sometimes the font and typography that is defined is not enough. We need to create some more styles to make it nicer. And also, data visualization requires additional components like tooltips or specific legends and so on. What should data visualization guidelines include? Unfortunately, there is no clear or unified approach. Creators use different tools. They can have different skill set. The organization can have different audience or needs, so it's not possible to have like a list or a predefined list of what to put in the guidelines. But if we have a look at what other people did, what other corporates published, we can see that there are some aspects that can be covered. Here, for example, IBM also spent some time to educate the audience to the principle of data visualization that will give them like a basic knowledge to take more informed decisions when designing charts. Other guidelines are putting a bit more effort in defining the styles and specifying all the colors, the fonts, and the basic layout. And this is quite powerful to quickly produce charts without too much thought and effort. And moreover, having something that is so clear will enforce the consistency and protect the identity of the brand. Other things that can be included is some guides to choose the right type of chart, as it is a fundamental to convey the right message. And providing this guidance will also, we can also disclose some strengths and peculiarities of each type of chart. As here, for example, we have a screenshot from the Google material design, where we see all the charts that can be used for part to all. And there is also an indication when it's better to use like a bar chart or instead of a pie chart. And this also explains why. The guide, so it's also, sometimes it's also good to specify some do and don'ts, some tips and best practices, so that we can make the creator, we can let him avoid some mistakes or just make a better chart, improve it. We can go a bit further, and we can also include some suggested solution to tricky situations. As an example, here on top we have multiple line chart with a lot of lines, and it is quite tricky to follow the line along the path. And the suggestion in this guideline was to divide it into small multiple and highlight to just one line per was more multiple. The context when the chart will be published is also quite important, and this could also be specified. We can define how to build a dashboard, or where to put the data source, or the title, or subtitle, or logo, so that it will be uniform and always the same layout for all the publications. Finally, we could also think a bit more beyond static visualization and also standardize transitions and interactions. Okay, now I want to walk you through 2 projects that I've done recently and show a bit of the process. The first case study is the Swisscom data visualization design guidelines. For this project, the context of the project was that the team, the data analytics, they provided a lot of reports and for internal stakeholders with the data in various formats, and there was nothing that was uniform. Everybody was free to use whatever they wanted, and of course it was a bit of all over the place. The purpose of this project was to develop a data visualization style guide and a template specifically for Tableau that would be in line with the Swisscom corporate design language. What we did is to look at the design language that was already available and take some of the aspects that were already defined. Like, we had a few charts that we could start with, and then we went through a bit more research and interviews with the users to better understand how they create the charts, how they consume the charts, and also the workflow. What we got as an insight from this interview is that the creators of the charts struggled a lot when they had to decide which was the right type of chart, which color and typography to use, and where to place the filters or other components. And they really wanted to, their desire was to have some simple charts that could be covered and easy to reproduce, but also have a bit of freedom to create more complex charts and ad hoc compositions. When we interviewed the end users, they struggled to orientate themselves and find the information because they were all different structure of the reports. And then a desire was to have some more recognizable cover pages that represented the content. This might seem not relevant, but if you look at the image on the side, this is what they had as an overview of all the reports, and they have a huge list of these thumbnails, and for them that was not ideal to look for what they were searching for or to find it. The first thing we did after receiving this information was to go to Tableau and really explore all the constraints, all the available feature, and all the possibility to format and style the chart. And also if there were some ways to reduce the waste when creating a new chart. So if you could reuse some parts or define something for the whole file. And in the end, we came up with a simple proposal for the content. We wanted to start with some general guidelines, but then go into the specific guidelines for the charts, and then for the page itself, for the different page layout. And as well, we also wanted to create a template where people could get started with, and another document as an example of how this could look like. This is what we came up with. what the end result. It was this example of the report, and is much more in line with their existing brand. Then we also created this empty template, so it's like the cover page with just the place order for the text, the place order for the different blocks, and also some defined pages like this closing page. For the style guide, this is also public on Tableau, so you can also have a look if you want. We decided to have this guideline in Tableau so that the user didn't have to like open another tool to get to the information, but it would be in the same tool. And here I have some slides that I would like to just as a showcase. We put some effort to create this cover as it was quite important for the end user, and we gave the freedom to select the background color, but also to select the illustration that would convey better the content of the report. We defined 3 layout options. There was like the list layout was best for getting a big picture, so it was more a long list of different charts, starting from the more high level to detailed. We had a focus layout, best for in-depth analysis, where we had a lot of filtering and sorting options. And finally, we had the summary, which is more a dashboard and ideal for a quick overview of the insights. Page navigation and structure of the reports were also documented, as well as for each type of chart that we covered, we had an example and we defined some best practices. And these best practices were actually ad hoc for the audience, so it was more looking at what failed in the report they created before, and we tried to educate them why they shouldn't do they shouldn't make certain decisions. And we did it for different charts. The next case study is about data visualization language for a company analyzing sustainable investments. Here, the company was producing a report of about 300 pages and several sections, and they were really data heavy, and they were put together using Excel for the charts. They were then imported into PowerPoint and create like a presentation, something that they could share. The purpose of the project was to redesign the report and develop the data visualization language in line with existing corporate brand. We didn't have then to create a proper style guide, but it was more extending the language. Their brand identity in the style guide, data visualization word was almost not defined. This was the only slide that I found about it, except for other examples. And this is what the report looked like. We had a lot of pages and we tried to organize them and group them. As you can see, there is no common language. Colors are not consistent, layout is not consistent, and also charts, they are sometimes quite difficult to read. When we interviewed the authors of the report, they said that the goal was to have a more consistent and cohesive product to increase the credibility and the trustworthiness of the research. And the end user wanted to keep everything or the structure it was, as everything was important and shouldn't split the content into multiple pages, otherwise the document would be even longer. Sorry. And they also mentioned that some charts were a bit confusing. Also here, we had to get familiar a bit more with the tool, as we use Excel, but not as a design tool. So we had to make sure that everything we proposed was possible to implement in Excel. In the end, we created a bunch of charts. We redesigned the charts, actually. And we tried to define like color coding for the different aspects and dimensions, as well as a consistent layout, and reusing the same chart if it would make sense. So reducing also the spectrum of charts. Here are some examples. This is the old report. It was more table-based, and we try to make it more visual. Here, this was a chart that we redesigned because we understood that the content could be visualized in a better way with a pie chart, and so with the proportions. Another example was in this chart with this box plot and a time series where it was needed to have a column for how to read the chart. We came up with a different way of visualizing it and getting rid of the explanation as we tested, and it was clear the information were perceived and understood correctly. I want to conclude with a few takeaways and some learnings that I want to share with you. The first one is make the data visualization guidelines fit into the broader design system and be ready to justify your decisions. What I found is that every time that I try to propose something new or something a bit out of their existing brand guidelines, it was always not. The brand team was not always happy about it. It's actually their job to keep it minimal. So I really had to justify why I made some decisions and why I didn't follow strictly the guidelines provided. Define what needs to be included in the guidelines is also a challenge sometimes, because you have to find the right level of details that are needed for that specific audience. And consider constraints early in the process. So dive into the tools that are used, how they're used, and the visualization will be published. It's also something that should be tackled as early as possible. The last point is design guidelines for a better workflow and not only for a better result. So whenever possible, try to make the life easier of the creator of the chart and not only a better result. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Tania and Sofia. It was really enlightening, and I think you completed each other very well, so it's really wonderful. We have two questions already being asked, so I will ask them for you to answer if you agree. The first question is, what do you think of IBCS, International Business Communication Standards? So I personally don't know what it is. So
me neither.
Yeah.
So there is a comment: great standard to work with. Does not focus on fancy visuals, but delivers the message fast and clearly, and reduces the risk of misunderstanding. Okay, so there is a website, apparently ibcs.com, so probably a great resource.
Yeah, we will check it.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question to Sofia, I think. How do you see the corporate uptake of visual analytics best practices, including data visualization, by continental Europe compared to US companies?
To be honest, I've never had a chance to work with US-based companies or branches, so maybe I'm not the right person to talk about it. Yeah, but I do recognize that, of course, there is this cultural aspect of or like or geographical aspect probably. That is definitely important when you work for a company which is based in a certain country. Like I had a chance to work with a company based in the Middle East, and of course the cultural aspects definitely had an impact on the design guidelines, like the way. At least the typography, just as a very basic example, that the fact that they are actually the whole writing is the way around from the right to left, and you have to consider all of those little details when you are working with the design guidelines, especially when if it's like a global solution, like a global application that will be roll out to different countries. The whole localization aspect also very important to consider. Just as a few ideas.
Thank you. Do you want to add something, Tania? Or?
Yeah, I'm not really. I'm not really aware of these differences. So, I never found myself like having to dig into it so far.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So then maybe we can move on to the next question. Thank you, Robert, for asking the question. And then we have a question from Dominique. Is there a good source to learn about the cultural differences of choosing colors content? Yeah, it's kind of the same topic.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I'm not sure about the cultural differences, but of course there is a bunch of really good sources on the color coding, and also I came across few very cool interactive like web tools where you can just upload your main colors from your color theme that you're using in the dashboard, and then would just provide some recommendation whether it works or not, or what are the alternatives. So some people really took care of it, and I think I've seen more and more tools appearing like this.
Yeah, in general, colors is a big topic, and could be like maybe meetup.
Just meetup on colors.
Just
next one.
Yes, that would be a very good topic actually. Okay. So I think there are no more questions for now, and we are like almost at the end of our time. So I will thank you again very much, Tania and Sofia, for your presentations and your time. It was really very enlightening. So thank you very much. And thank you everyone for showing up and contributing to the discussion and in the chat. Please don't hesitate to give us feedback or suggestions over meetup.com. So how did you like the webinar setup? If there is anything that we could improve. Also, if you have topics that you would want to be covered, we already have colors. And also for potential speakers, or if you would like to present something yourself, please don't hesitate to reach out to us either on meetup.com or on Twitter at DatavisZRH, DatavisZRH, also on Instagram, also DatavisZRH. And yeah, we will publish the slides on meetup.com. So you will have access to the resources that Tania and Sofia shared. And for the next meetup, we don't have a date yet, but I can already tell you that it will be about creating empathy with data visualization. So we will share very soon the time and date for the next meetup. And until then, I wish you all the best, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Tania. Bye, Sofia.
Bye.